This is Dom Bettinelli, the CEO of SQPN, with a brief but very important message. For more than a decade, SQPN has produced the Catholic faith and pop culture podcasts that you love. We're a nonprofit organization, so it's only your generosity that lets us carry out our mission. We haven't run a fundraiser in 2 years, and that's why we need to ask for your help right now. Please make a pledge of whatever amount you can afford to help us continue providing your favorite podcasts, as well as exciting new ones we have planned. To make your pledge and find out about the free thank you gifts we'd like to send you, visit sqpn.com/give. That's sqpn.com/give. Thank you for your generosity. May we hear from you today? You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode 104.
One day, I shall come back.
That's it. I've been renewed.
It's when a Time Lord's body wears out, he regenerates.
I'm a Time Lord. I'm not a human being. I walk in eternity.
Bravehearty.
Change, my dear, and it seems not a moment too soon.
Unlimited rice pudding.
Position universe.
Wearing a bit thin.
Fantastic.
Allons-y!
I am Scottish. I can complain about things.
Ta-da! Ooh. Should be fine.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. Today we're discussing the 10th Doctor, David Tennant episode, Shakespeare Code. Joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Corey Stika. Hi, Father Corey.
How's it going, Dom?
Great. So let's jump into this. This episode is first aired in April of 2007. It's the third season of the renewed Doctor Who, the new Who as we call it, and it is was it the third or second?
Well,
second
it
episode.
depends on second or third if you count the Runaway Bride as the first.
Right. Yeah, how the seasons count, but it's the second Martha Jones episode. Let's put it that way.
Correct.
And I feel like I have this feeling I've seen this episode before, only with Christopher Eccleston and Billy Piper going back not quite so far in time.
Which one are you referring to specifically, Jimmy?
The one with Charles Dickens.
Oh,
yes.
Right.
Yes.
And
actually, that's something becomes a criticism by Martha Jones to the Doctor in the next episode, is that he keeps taking her to the same places or similar situations as he took Rose.
Yeah, and the whole Rose, the Doctor's pining for Rose thing comes up. In this episode too, a lot. Yes. Yeah. One of our criticisms, but
if Rose was here, she'd know the right thing to say.
Like the most insensitive thing. Like even apart from the romantic things, you've brought this person with you, and you're like treating them like dirt.
Like dirt.
Yeah, it was really bad. We'll get to that. Let's talk a little about the background. So, this was William Shakespeare appearing on Doctor Who, which apparently he was on previously in 1965.
Yes. Yeah, he was on in an episode in the first episode of a serial called The Chase. And in that episode, the Doctor had built kind of a time TV that would let you tune into different moments in history. And so he and Barbara and Ian and Vicky looked in on different moments in history. And we see, for Barbara's, we see an older William Shakespeare talking to Queen Elizabeth I about his parody of a British nobleman as Falstaff. And then Queen Elizabeth and one of her courtiers suggest ideas for plays to William Shakespeare, which are then the genesis of two actual famous plays, including Hamlet.
Okay. Yes, the writers who do stories about William Shakespeare can't help but have people suggest to William Shakespeare the things that he eventually creates, which they do in this episode a lot.
By the way, the title of this episode, The Shakespeare Code, is clearly an allusion to the Da Vinci Code.
Right, which was still somewhat relevant in 2007, although not as. It was even then it was a little dated, I think.
Yeah.
So this was one of the most expensive episodes of Doctor Who they ever produced because of the cost of the costumes and the sets, including the fact that they filmed on location in London at the rebuilt Globe Theatre. That's in London. In fact, my family, we have a bunch of DVDs of Shakespeare plays produced in the theater, which are great, by the way. Shakespeare at the Globe, great. If you, my kids love them. And
Stephen Coriolanus.
Well, no, that's not one of the ones we have.
Titus Andronicus.
Mostly the comedies. Let's just put it that way. So the theater, they had to film in the theater between performances. So as soon as a performance one night was done, they had to break it all down, put up all of their sets and effects and all the lighting and everything, film all night, and then be done in the morning. So it was a very costly, very, very complex production that they had to do. So, but you know, I'm grateful that they decided to use the Globe Theater. I mean, that they incorporated it with Ed, you know, without having to rebuild it as a soundstage set.
Yeah,
and it does look like they did some with the soundstage, like some of the audience scenes and everything like that are rebuilt soundstage. Yes, which would make sense. I mean, it would be easier to do those kind of scenes where they could do them all in a separate location at a separate time.
And apparently the large wide angle view where you see all the boxes filled with crowd and everything, and even the crowd at the foot of the stage, that was all CGI. They pretty much like copy pasted and changed some of the people, but it was all. I mean, at any one time, there's probably like 20 people on the stage. But they used CGI to create this massive crowd to fill the theater. So it was very
that holds up well. I didn't notice that.
Yeah, I saw it in online. There's a behind the scenes, which was very nice. Well, it must be on a DVD extra. So the basic story, as a reward for helping the Doctor in Smith and Jones, he takes her on a trip. He gets one trip. You're just getting one trip, which is famous last words from the Doctor. And
in fact, he originally meant, he tells us to like only bring her here and let her walk around a little bit and take her back. Yes, and you're going to get an adventure offer, but once the adventure starts, he decides not to take her back so quickly.
Right, and so they takes her to 1599 in the lifetime of William Shakespeare. But we don't start with the Doctor. We start with before the credits is this scene with the witches, the three witches that remind us of Macbeth. And
a balcony scene that reminds us of Romeo and Juliet.
Yes, with a witch named Lilith, which has Jimmy, can you talk a little about the name Lilith in relation to Eden? Adam and Eve?
So Lilith is mentioned in the Bible, and there's some debate among scholars about exactly what Lilith was. Some have suggested that it's a kind of animal. It's also been suggested it's like a demon that inhabits deserted places. But then in Jewish folklore, Lilith became the first wife of Adam. And according to this folklore, Adam had three wives. The first was Lilith, who was made out of the same kind of soil Adam was. And so she was fully equal to Adam in every way and didn't want to submit to him as a wife. And so that one didn't work out. And she later, in some versions of the folklore, goes off and like becomes a consort of the devil. Then God made, according to some versions of the folklore, the first Eve, which was who was made out of like this dark, heavy earth. And she was not as smart as Adam, and she was not smart enough. And so she was also unsuitable. And then God made the third wife out of Adam's rib. And so the third one was just right.
Not too smart, not too dumb.
We have the base of the Goldilocks and Three Bears.
Yeah. But in any event, so Lilith is a figure that's explored, is mentioned in the Bible, but is really explored in Jewish folklore and is commonly regarded as a sinister feminine figure who's up to no good.
unfortunately, today some feminists have really taken her on as an ideologue.
Well, in fact, in pop culture in the 90s and in the 2000s, there was the Lilith Fair, which was sort of this feminist, it's sort of the idea is, women got the shaft, they didn't get their due, and Lilith is representative of what women could have been throughout history and weren't. And the only reason I bring that up is because it seems she's the only one of the witches who has like a real name. She's very intentionally named here, and I felt like that maybe there's some kind of connection to that.
Well, and when you look at where these witches come from, I think it fits with that that this wasn't an explicit choice to name her that.
Yeah, because
for the very reasons that Jimmy just mentioned.
Yeah, they're very demon-like, shall we say?
And from the dawn of time.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. So this poor young fellow serenading Lilith ends up becoming lunch, and so
remarkably bloodless lunch. I mean, come on.
Well,
you're clearly showing us in silhouette that they're really tearing into this guy, and then none of them have any blood on their chin or anything. And then we get the line where Lilith, now in her witch form, tells us that coming real soon, this fleeting earth shall perish. And it's like, okay, great. So now we've already got the stakes ramped up to entire Earth.
Right.
At least it's not entire universe.
Well, and that why are you looking at the camera and telling us this? Who's standing there that you're talking to? Like, why is this the moment to say that? Yeah, that was very awkwardly done, I have to say. So the Doctor and Martha show up, and Martha's got a lot of those, first time traveler questions and concerns, like the butterfly effect and.
Entirely reasonable questions to ask. Martha's doing a good job in that scene.
Yeah, it's like, what if I kill my grandfather? And he's like, why would you want to kill your grandfather? There's some great moments. Why would you step on a butterfly? Don't step on butterflies.
What have butterflies ever done to you?
Yeah, exactly.
And then they bring up the race issue, which is interesting because we kind of got that again later on with Bill and Capaldi's Doctor 12, where they went back in time to Regency London in their case. And the race issue comes up, so it's sort of been dealt with a couple times now, and Doctor
that's reasonable. Those are also years apart. So anytime you have a black companion and you go to a time when blacks were second-class citizens in England, it's logical to raise that as a question.
Yeah, but I actually kind of prefer the way they deal with it here than the way Moffat does later, which is it was kind of awkward. But this one, he just kind of says, hey, it wasn't as bad as you think. Not every black person was a slave, is essentially what he's saying. And just act like you own the place. It works for me. And that's true. It does work for him. And then he realizes where they are and when they are, and they race off to go to the Globe Theater to see a play, and they see Love's Labor's Lost. And, and then there's a reference to Love's Labor's Won, another Shakespeare play that doesn't exist. And it turns out that there is an actual lost play.
Well, there's a controversy about is it really lost or not.
Right. Well, it could be one of the other existing plays.
Yeah. And so we do know that there was a play called Love's Labor's Won, and it may have been a lost play that was a sequel to Love's Labor's Lost, although it was very uncommon to have sequels for comedies back then.
Right.
They didn't really do that. And so that's led to suggestions. It may be another play. For a long time, there was a suggestion it might be The Taming of the Shrew. But there's reason to doubt that. And there have been suggestions it was various other Shakespeare plays, too.
Right.
We don't really know.
Right. It's so Love's Labor's Lost is dated to about 1594 to 95. And this is 1599 that we're in. And that the Love's Labor's Lost is a comedy about the King of Navarre and three companions who swear off of women for 3 years of study and fasting, but then they meet and fall for three women, and it ends on a cliffhanger, sort of.
They're about to get married, but then suddenly, for no apparent plot reason, their marriages are delayed by a year.
Yes, which is even Shakespeare had plot problems. But interesting, three women. We have the three witches, which were more of a reference to Macbeth, but still the three women. In this story, Love's Labor's one is being used and manipulated by these three witches who turns out are actually aliens from the dawn of time. Carrionites. Who, when I first heard that, until I read the article online, I thought it was Carrion Knights, Knights, which didn't make any sense.
It sound like that.
Yeah.
It does sound like that.
So, it's an awkward name because it's hard to make that distinction. But they use words to alter reality and manipulate. And since Shakespeare is the premier wordsmith in history, they use him they're using him to alter reality to bring their people back from whatever place they were shoved to.
Yeah, they tell us the Eternals, who is a race we meet in the Fifth Doctor story Enlightenment. The Eternals have imprisoned the Carrionites in some dimension, and when Shakespeare lost his son, he was grieving enough that somehow his words allowed 3 of the Carrionites to escape. They arranged for the Globe Theater to be built in a special way so that if the right words are said from the stage at the right time by one actor, it can be anybody, but this one guy gets to say the words, it will open up a portal and let all of their brethren or sisterin or whatever they are back into the world, at which point our Earth will end and they will take over everything.
Right. The stakes are as high as they can be.
Yeah. Well, just the planet at this point. It's not the whole universe.
Okay. Well, the stakes are as high as they can be for us. I mean, really, after that, who cares about the rest of the universe? So one of the things that kind of struck me is the portrayal of Shakespeare here is they make him into a cad.
Handsome young guy.
Well, yes. Younger than I think he would have actually, appears younger than he actually would have been at the time.
Well, and they allude to that. At one point, he's rubbing his head, and the doctor tells him, "Don't, your hair will fall out."
But the Shakespeare was a married family man, and he flirts with Martha, and intimates that he has relations with other women, and
men. And
yes, hints at the interest in the doctor, which is annoying.
That scene drove me nuts.
Right. But there was no reason. Why? What is the purpose of that?
Well, because 57 professors or 57 experts just punch their hand in the air.
Right.
Whatever, how you put it.
Right. Because there's some fringe theory about Shakespeare's sexuality. Right.
Yeah. And also it's Russell T. Davies, so we have to go there.
Yes. That unfortunately. But Shakespeare was a married man, and he had his wife did not, lived in the country while he was living in the city. That's true, but that doesn't mean that he was a cad. So there's that whole element. We have him flirting with Martha, and then we have
who immediately says, "Verily, forsooth, egads," and the doctor just says, "Don't,
no, don't do that."
No, don't.
Again, something that those if we ever did that, we might be tempted to. We want to fit in, so we have to talk like people then did. We have the doctor and Martha end up in the same bed, and the doctor being clueless about Martha's interest in him. Which is,
completely clueless. They're looking each other in the face, lying on their sides, and he says, "I feel like there's something just staring me in the face, and I can't see it." Rose would have known.
I have to say that some of the writing in this is just way too obvious. It's not. There's no subtlety in much of this episode.
Apropos of that, all of the Shakespeare quotes that we get.
Yes.
Where the doctor or Martha will, but especially the doctor will say something in front of Shakespeare and he'll say, "Ooh, I might use that." And they try to not have that be too one note because like at one point when the doctor says, "Rage, rage against the dying of the light." Okay, that's a Dylan Thomas quote. So the doctor tells Shakespeare, you can't have that one.
Yeah, somebody already has that.
Yeah, but there's too much of it. And then later on, once they realize Love's Labor's 1 is part of the central plot of the Carrionites, it's like, oh, the play's the thing. It's like, oh man, yeah. There's just too much of that.
The writer, his name is Gareth Roberts, and he apparently has quite a thing for Shakespeare. Like he he revisits Shakespeare often in his various things that he's written. He actually wrote a Ninth Doctor comic strip in which he included Shakespeare. So sometimes it's not a good idea to have a fan write something.
It's going back to this idea of Shakespeare really wasn't that intelligent. Yes, he was an intelligent wordsmith and he wrote all kinds of good stuff, but he didn't come up with everything himself. Everybody else gave him ideas of what he was supposed to write for.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a bad temptation especially in New Who. This attempt to this tendency to sort of go back in history to all the great humanity of history, the great people of history, and undermine their greatness by making it really the Doctor who was great.
Yeah. While simultaneously worshiping them.
Exactly.
And just building them up beyond reason. Like here we have, and this aspect is okay. But so when Martha and the Doctor are first talking with Shakespeare, the Doctor tries to use the psychic paper on him. And Shakespeare says, that's blank. And the Doctor realizes it's because he's such a super genius, he can see through the psychic paper, which Martha can't. Martha thinks it says Sir Doctor and Martha Jones. But then we have the same fanboy treatment of William Shakespeare that we had of Charles Dickens, where it's just building this guy up way too much. And that really comes out particularly, I mean, they mentioned throughout this how he's a genius. They keep using that word. He's this genius wordsmith. And so at the very end, when the Carrionites are being released, the Doctor tells Shakespeare, okay, you are the one to undo this. The words have been spoken that have let the Carrionites out. You're the genius. You're the wordsmith. You're the only one who can find the right words.
And then half of them end up coming from the Doctor anyways.
And coming from the Doctor and Martha. It's like if either
J.K. Rowling,
the guy,
come on. No.
yeah, the guy is if he's either a super genius wordsmith or he's not, let him have the moment or don't do it this way.
Yes.
Right.
Also, by the way, the words that get used, there are plot problems with the Carrionites' whole plan here, because they need Shakespeare because he's a super genius wordsmith, so he's the one to come up with the words to unlock all the other Carrionites. But then when we actually hear the words, it's like these stellar coordinates.
Right.
That there's no way Shakespeare came up with that. They just fed it into his consciousness through this green mist. So they didn't need Shakespeare to write the words. They if they wanted to do it that way, the writers should have had it be much more organic and poetic and not just a list of star coordinates.
Right. There was this, like, she was, in fact, almost a marionette a moment where Shakespeare's unconscious and she's moving his hand on the page. Like, what? Like, why? Like, what was the point then? Why do you need him? Yeah.
Yeah. And then why bother putting on the play? Because it's this, they don't establish anything other than the final lines of the play as being necessary to open this gateway. Right. So why didn't you and your sisters just go onto that stage when no one was around and say the words and open it up like it started to open up earlier in the day?
Right, like during the dress rehearsal or the rehearsal when the two actors were on the stage and one of the Carrionites came through, and that was another thing, is like, we'll never speak of this again. Like, why? Something.
Why didn't you say something?
You saw this thing and you're gonna, oh well, of course we're never gonna talk about this. Oh yes, we'll never talk about this. What?
I know, it's just hand waving.
Yeah.
By the way, I like the fact that those two actors are the characters of the actors were real guys in Shakespeare's company.
Yes.
And I forget one of their names, but the other is Will Kempe.
Yeah.
And he's the one he has the lighter colored hair, and he's the more comic figure. He's the one that gets the line, forgive our irksome Will, he's been on the beer and is feeling kind of ill.
Yeah.
When Shakespeare collapses. And then he does this little bit of a dance as he backs up on the stage. And that's actually true to who Will Kempe was. he was known for doing comedic dances. And in fact, he was a Morris dancer, and he did a stunt once he called his 9 Days Wonder, where he Morris danced from London to Norwich, which is more than 100 miles over a period of 9 days. And like crowds showed up to cheer him on. And I was on YouTube. I found a guy, a Morris dancer in England today, who reduplicated the 9 Days Wonder. Only it took him a lot less than 9 days. But but for me, that was a real treat getting to see Will Kempe.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, the other one is Richard Burbage, or Dick, they calls him in this, who also was an actor of Shakespeare's time.
One thing I will say, though, talking about the words, I like that concept of the words actually creating.
Yes, words have power.
Words have the magic spell, the power of words. And of course, it does play into the idea of, how, fiction and you're creating worlds in fiction and then bringing that into the real world. I do think that was a good concept. And of course, as Christians, we hold the word as something very important.
Right. Jesus is the Logos. Yeah.
He is the Logos. He is the word. And we hold, the scriptures being his words, the word of God, is something, something that's sacred.
Though ordinary human words are not magical.
Right. No. Right. The word of God has power.
There's something interesting in this, in that the doctor says early on, when Martha asks if magic is real, he says, no, of course not. It just looks like magic. But then when he starts talking about the Carionite technology, and he says, okay, they use words to accomplish effects the same way you use technology. And it's like, okay, that's magic. You just took away with the left hand what you'd given with the right. Incidentally, this is something that's explored, and the Carionites do appear in Big Finish some. I haven't listened to those, but there is a exploration of a similar concept a couple of times in Big Finish that's awesome, where we have a word-based technology. The doctor meets a guy who's known as the Word Lord instead of a Time Lord. He comes from a dimension where everything operates based on words, and his name is Nobody No One. and the thing is, Nobody No One gains power from words. And so whenever he shows up, it's vitally important that you don't say things like, nobody could fly the TARDIS by himself, because then nobody can fly the TARDIS by himself. Or nobody could break into the TARDIS. Well, then nobody can break into the TARDIS. And it's
that's a cool idea.
It's really cool.
That's interesting. Well, in fact, speaking of names, one of the aspects of this is this magical trick. You gain power over. Doctor gains power over the Carionite by knowing her name, and they can use your name against you, except they can't gain control of the doctor because they don't know his name. I mean, one of the fundamental aspects of the doctor is no one knows his name. And so that becomes an issue, a central issue in this story. So that I like that part of it. Then I also like the fact that the doctor uses Back to the Future to explain to Martha Jones how the world can end, even though she's still standing there.
That was great.
Martin McFly.
That was a nice little bit of pop culture reference. And then, so at the end, once they've sent the Carionites off to wherever they're going to go, back to their hell where they're living, we have show up in the Globe Theater Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah,
the first.
Who calls the doctor her sworn enemy, even though he has no idea why she is his enemy. That must be something from the future, which of course we find out in the 50th anniversary special.
Yeah, and it doesn't pay off until all those years later with a new showrunner.
Exactly.
I know they kind of left it hanging, but it's kind of funny that it's there. Couple other notes that I have is they tell Shakespeare that Martha is from Fredonia. And
I love that.
Fredonia is a fictional color from a Marx Brothers film, Duck Soup.
Oh, yes.
And
the Hail, hail, Fredonia.
Shakespeare. So at one point they mentioned the Sycorax attacking on Christmas Day in the 10th Doctor's first Christmas episode, And that Shakespeare eventually he says, "Oh, I love that word. I should use it." He does actually. The word Sycorax is actually in the play The Tempest. So
right, Sycorax is an unseen character. She's a witch who's the mother of the monster Caliban.
Yep. So we can guess that we have a circular explanation, because I'm guessing that the Sycorax of Doctor Who were named for from that character. And then Shakespeare talks about how Martha has become a bit of his muse, and that he's going to write about her. And in fact,
Dark Lady. In
fact, that many of the sonnets feature the Dark Lady, which scholars today, of course, see that as a metaphorical. In this, we make her literal.
Incidentally, on the subject, because the race issue came up at the beginning of the episode, and it comes up again when Shakespeare's talking to Martha. He starts using all these poetic expressions of ways of referring to a black woman.
Yeah.
Like Princess of Afrique or things like that. I forget exactly what they all were. And Martha starts to take offense at it. And there's a moment where the Doctor he rubs his face with his hand and says, "Political correctness gone crazy." And and I kind of agree in that. I mean, we should, whether we can or not in a politically correct environment, we should be able to talk about human characteristics. I mean, we can talk about people's eye color. Right. We can talk about their hair color. We can talk about their skin color. It's all just cosmetic anyway. And having, poetic ways of referring to someone. I'm not going to take offense if someone calls me a flame-haired whatever because I've got red hair. And in the same way, Martha, I shouldn't take offense at Shakespeare trying to pay her compliments with poetic ways of referring to her heritage.
I mean, after all, according to the Andorians, we're a bunch of pink skins. Oh, wait, that's a different show.
Yeah.
Well, so I think what it was is like Shakespeare says, "Who is your delicious blackamoor lady?" And she takes offense, and he's like, "Oh, isn't that a word we use nowadays? Oh, is it Ethiop girl, a swarth, a queen of Afrique?" And the Doctor, says, "It's political correctness gone mad." And I think it's sort of ambiguous to me, but I think what he's saying is that these are all terms that are politically correct terms of Shakespeare's time.
Yeah.
As
I said, those are the terms they would have used then.
Right.
And, again, and this is one of the criticisms of Doctor Who I know we've had before is they judge the past by modern standards.
Right. This is a case where I think they get it right, where the Doctor's saying, don't judge, what he's saying based on your modern standards. It was the politically correct way of speaking in 1599.
Yeah. He's not trying to insult you, in other words.
Right.
One thing in that same scene that is of their times is they have this character come in. I forget his name, but he is a censor.
Lindley.
And he's demanding, okay, if you've just said you're going to perform Love's Labours 1 tomorrow night, I need the script right now because I've got to read it. And this is something they actually had back in England at the time, because this was just after the Reformation. And Elizabeth I was not a kindly ruler, and there were concerns that the theater could be used to stir up revolution. And in fact, in various totalitarian societies, theater has been used as a way of communicating secret political statements to the masses.
Right.
We know that happened in the Soviet world, for example, and they were very concerned at the time that the same thing was happening through the theaters in London. And in fact, there have been people who've looked at Shakespeare's plays, scholars today, and said these actually have a lot of subversive, pro-Catholic, anti-establishment messages in them. And so it would have been Lindley's job to keep anything too inflammatory from getting on the stage. So that's what he's there for. And then the witches, when they realize he's going to stop the play from going off when they need it to, they kill him and they drown him on dry land. So he's like spurting water out of his mouth between camera takes. He's clearly refilled his mouth between the camera takes. But then when he finally dies, the Doctor is like, I've never seen a death like this. This man is drowned. His lungs are full of water. And it's like, actually, doctor, you saw this exact death in the 1971 The Mind of Evil, where someone's lungs filled up with water on dry land and they died.
Dry drowning. It's actually a thing, is dry drowning. Lindley was the master of revels, was the title he had. So, great. So anything else we want to say about this? Father Corey, do you have anything additional you want to say about Shakespeare Code?
Nope.
How about you, Jimmy?
Just briefly, and I mentioned this earlier, I really hate the genius business in this. At one point, Shakespeare is like, this is more mutual admiration of the Doctor and Shakespeare. It's like, all these years I've been the cleverest man around, but I can't hold a candle to the Doctor.
Oh, yeah.
It's please.
Yes.
Exactly.
I liked the single heart massage that Martha gives the Doctor. It's like the witch tries to kill the Doctor and assumes he has only one heart, and so only stops one of them, which I thought that was clever. Overall, though, I thought with all the Shakespeare lines, there was, on the writing level, there was just way too much mugging for the camera in this episode.
Yeah, exactly. Good. So, so my final, it was an okay episode. It wasn't terrible. Wasn't great. It was fun seeing the Globe Theater. I like that aspect of it, but it could have been better. Put it that way. So, and that kind of is the Martha Jones season. Preview of things to come. So I guess that's it from us. What did you think of this 10th Doctor episode, the Shakespeare Code? Did you love it? Are we wrong? Let us know. Or do you agree with us? Let us know that too. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know by visiting sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page. Find the link to today's show and leave us a comment there. Or send us an email to doctorwho@sqpn.com. And also, if you could like the show, like when you see it posted on Facebook, or retweet it on Twitter, share it with friends. We're always trying to grow our audience and reach more folks who are fans of Doctor Who, just to kind of spread the wealth. And we do this because we want to connect with folks and build a community around Doctor Who, and we rely on you to do that. We're relying. We don't have a budget to buy advertising for our podcast. We rely on the good heart of our listeners to share our podcast with others. So we would really appreciate if you do that. Also, go to sqpn.com and check out some of our other shows that you might be interested in. We have Secrets of Star Trek. We have Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, we're having a lot of fun with that. Check it out. We've got some great episodes we've done and some more that are coming. We've got Let's Talk with Father Corey is hosting that as well. So please go check out our other shows on sqpn.com, and we would greatly appreciate that. So until next time, Father Corey Stika, thank you for joining me in sharing the secrets of Doctor Who.
Yeah, glad to be here as always. Thanks, Dom.
And Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thanks, Dom.
And I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening, and remember, foul Carrionite specters, cease your show between the points 761390.
Right. This is going to be fun.
This is Dom Bettinelli again. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast and that you'll help us keep producing the podcast you love. Thank you for your generosity. To make your pledge and find out about the free thank you gifts we'd like to send you, visit sqpn.com/give. That's sqpn.com/give.